The Huntsman of Adamos, The Huntsman's Honor. Chapter 3. Gifts Others Do Not Have. Author's note: a stone is a measure of distance and volume. It is equal in length to a warrior's reach without a sword, or about 1 meter. A field is a kilometer. A hand thick is about 2.5 centimeters or 1 inch. Yurieth was standing in the top of the highest tree he could find. He was grieving the bear that had been his companion since it was a cub. It had been killed by another. He was waiting for the offending male to return to the spot where his friend had been murdered so he could get his revenge. The tree shifted next to his. Regis climbed up to his level. "Our fathers are seeking us," Regis said quietly. "I have something to do first," Yurieth answered angrily, but just as quietly. "The old forester would not approve of this," Regis pointed out. Yurieth ground his teeth against each other as his jaw clenched. His mentor Vlast had gone into the light only a month ago. "I do not care." "Oh-ho, now you're lying. You do care. You care too much, and now you wish to take out your pain on the source. But it is not the bear's fault for being a bear. It killed Ursel. That is nature's way," Regis reminded. He sat down on a limb that looked too thin to hold his bulk. He worried for how deeply his friend felt things, how seriously he took in every action, word, and detail around him. Yuri wasn't like the huntsmen in his family. They were a jovial group when together, and happily solitary when apart. None were as contemplative and brooding as the next High Lord of Adamos, and Regis wondered if it was because he had spent his childhood training to be an oracle. Yuri was the most powerful huntsman Regis knew, though he was just a novice. Even his cousins and uncles had been impressed with the young man's abilities and determination, in spite of his emotional nature. They stayed silent in the tops of the trees for several minutes before they heard feet crunching through the brush. Yurieth walked into the clearing below the ridge and looked around. He was at least 40 stones below them. "Where are you, brother? I can feel you watching me," Yurieth's mind demanded of his brothers. Yurieth crouched slightly, then sprung from the tree and dropped along the rock face before twisting and landing on his feet, absorbing the impact with his magic. He could drop twice the distance of any of the other novices he knew. Yurieth jerked around and stared at him, startled. "Don't do that!" "Sorry, brother. I'm a huntsman. It's my magic." Unapologetic, Yurieth shrugged, not even blinking when Regis jumped from halfway down the cliff and landed beside him. "Yes, well, you slink around like a forest spirit. Mother and father want to talk to us before we go. Regulus is here to take us to the King's Academy," Yurieth responded. They walked in silence back to the winter castle. Yurieth did not want to go to the King's Academy. He wanted to stay in his forest. But the kingdom was at war, and if he and Yurieth wanted to improve their skills before doing their required time of service, they needed to go. Yurieth was already surpassing their tutors in sword art and with the staff and battle axe. The best teachers were said to be in the city of the kings. So Yurieth would follow his brother and see how much more he could learn. Huntsmen weren't used for much more than reconnaissance in the war, so he didn't expect much from the next several decades. When they arrived in the Bailey yard of the Winter Castle, Lady Yelmina was waiting. She pushed back Yurieth's hood and ran her fingers through his wavy blonde hair before hugging him. In her embrace he could feel all her fear and love, all her concern and compassion. She was worried for him. "Do not worry, Mother. We will return before you've had time to miss us," Yurieth promised with a smile. His mother whispered in his ear, "Too late, my eldest. I miss you already. Be careful. Watch out for your brother. You know how he forgets to look over his shoulder. Show them how powerful you truly are. Don't hold back and be what they expect. Be what you are destined to be. I love you." Yelmina released him and turned to hug Yurieth, murmuring to him. The castle seneschal appeared in the door. "My Lord Yurieth, your father wishes to see you in his office before you go." Yurieth flipped his hood back up as he strode up the stairs to his father's study, raising his hand to knock, but his father called out to him first. "Come in, Yurieth." Yurieth bowed. "Father." "Put back your hood and look at me," Adamos ordered, and Yurieth obeyed. "Sit down." He gestured to his tiles table. "Let's have a quick game before you leave." Yurieth watched his father make the opening play, and they began to rapidly place tiles. It was a game of skill and strategy. His father had made him play it since he was a child. It was always a teaching time to sit across from his father. "Listen to me, my son. Regulus and Axion are going to push for a change in the roles of huntsmen on the warfront. Huntsmen will no longer just be wilderness scouts. They are going to be field commanders, spies, and possibly more. I know you do not want to leave our forest, but you have more potential than you can realize if you stay here. You are an Adamos, from a long line of warriors and oracles. You will be able to see the battle before they progress, the way you know which direction a flock of birds will turn when you are hunting. They will teach you very narrow skills. I want you to take those lessons and use them in ways no one has thought of before, and share your knowledge with others. You are more than just a huntsman, and I expect you to bring honor to our house." They had never stopped laying the carved tiles as his father spoke. "But, Father, what good are woodland skills in the cities and plains?" "What is a city but a forest of another kind? Buildings are cliffs and trees. Tunnels are caves. Everything is the same. It is only the surface that creates the illusion of difference. You were trained to be an oracle. You know to look beyond the surface illusions of this world. I expect you to do whatever Regulus demands, then exceed his expectations. Failure is not an option." More tiles clicked in the silence that ensued. "Remember, Yurieth, it is the duty of the high houses to care for others because we have gifts others do not." Adamos's silver eyes never left Yurieth's silver eyes as they both laid the tile they had in hand. Looking down, Yurieth realized he only had one move left before he lost. So he stood up and bowed to his father, reaching out to lay his last tile. But his father's hand stopped him. "Take it with you, and we shall finish the game when you return, my son." Yurieth closed his hand around the tile, one of the 8 winds, and bowed again. "Farewell, father," he said, leaving without another word. Adamos breathed out a prayer and murmured after him, "Return safe, my eldest. Fight with honor." Almost a year later, Yurieth and Abrieth walked through the halls of the King's Academy after lunch. Both were tired from 6 days of skills testing at the end of the term, and both just wanted to eat. Both just wanted to have a nap after they ate, before catching a transport home for winter break. So far, they had both received top marks, much to the dismay of several of the older students. Suddenly, a group of 6 surrounded them. Yurieth kept his head high. Eyes darted around the compass primary, as Abrieth glanced in the 4 tertiary directions. Their minds shared what they both saw. So, the House of Adamos thinks they can waltz into the King's Academy and use their magic to cheat their way into the top ranks after only a year. Tytol, one of the warriors that both the twins had bested in swords and hand-to-hand combat, accused with a derisive sneer, "We have done no such thing. I have not used my huntsman's magic, and Abrieth has not used his warrior magic except when allowed. The use of magic does not improve poor skill." Yurieth repeated what his mentors of the House of Adamos often said. "We know you're both oracles. You see the future, and that's how you cheat." Tytol's twin, Tinus, snarled at them. Abrieth leveled him with a look. The dark golden eyes and coppery hair of his mother's house gave him the fiery appearance of his temper. "We are not using our parents' magic, and we do not cheat. Preparedness and quickness of thought negates the need to falsely earn our marks. Unlike the House of Thalanosa, the House of Adamos believes in honor before prestige, tiny Tinus." Abrieth mocked him. Yurieth caught the fist thrown at the back of his brother's head as Abrieth lunged forward. In his mind, Yurieth told Abrieth who was going to move next and how, while he dealt with the 2 attacking him. Tytol and his brother Tinus had backed away, waiting to see who would get the upper hand. The other novices had gathered and were shouting. It was as they gained the upper hand that Yurieth noticed the sons of Thalanosa trying to slip away. "I am going after our enemy," he announced to Abrieth's mind, just as his brother brutally punched one of the antagonists, dropping him to the ground unconscious. "Go ahead. I have these 3. Abrieth returned as he put another boy on the floor. "Oops, I mean 2. Yurieth dropped another one of them with a vicious kick to the head. "You mean 1. "Brother, you always thieve my fun. They're getting away," Abrieth pointed out, trading blows with the giant lad from the House of Gaian. Yurieth watched his brother for a moment, then took 4 bounding leaps up a wall between 2 columns and ran down the rafter beams after the instigators. Tytol and Tinus stopped in an alcove, snickering about their success. Yurieth let the shadows hide him as he listened to them brag to each other about how easy it was to get the other senior students to attack the sons of Adamos. Suddenly Yurieth dropped between them. He slammed their heads together hard enough to render both unconscious. He threw Tinus over his shoulder and picked up Tytol by his belt, dragging him like a bundle of wood back to where his brother was waiting, sitting on a pile of the 4 other boys. Yurieth moved, and Yurieth heaped the 2 on top. Looking slowly around at the others in the novice dorms, Yurieth gazed at the now silent crowd. He let the frigid promise of retribution shine in his silver eyes. Does anyone else wish to accuse the House of Adamos of cheating, or follow in the footsteps of these who live in dishonor? Yurieth stood with his arms across his chest. He was shorter than Yurieth by a few handthicks, but he was much broader shouldered, and side by side they presented a formidable pair. Regis began clapping from the back of the crowd. He had arrived late to the racket, and therefore lost the chance to aid his friends. Several others began clapping, then cheering. Yurieth grinned, but Yurieth only betrayed a slight smile. A smaller boy from a common house reached out and tapped Yurieth's arm. "Lord Yurieth, could you teach me? I mean, help me? Perhaps you too, Lord Yurieth. Please. I'm just a commoner. I want to be a guardsman like my father was." Yurieth and Yurieth had a quick discussion in mind. Then Yurieth spoke to the other novices. "Are most of you training for the Guardsman Corps, and not for the rankings of protectors?" There was a murmur of acknowledgment. Then Yurieth frowned as he asked, "Did any of you have martial training before you came here?" Most shook their heads negatively. He glanced at his brother, who gave a quick nod. Yurieth announced, "We will be glad to help you train. Find us after winter break, and we will teach you what we know." A group of older novices followed them toward their room, so Yurieth and Yurieth turned to face them as one. Regis eyed the novices sadly, noting the black bands on the left arm of each one's uniform. "Please, my lords, we are being sent out during the intermission. Could you spend a little time with us before break? We don't have the training you do, and—" The boy looked nervously at the others. So Regis finished for him. "And you are afraid you are being sent to the front lines as fodder for the berserker warriors." The novices didn't answer. Yurieth's mouth made a thin line. Then he said, "Meet us at the training rings after curfew. We will teach you what we can over the next 10 days." Then Regis closed the door of the room the 3 of them shared. "So we're doing this?" Yurieth looked between the Huntsman novices. "What am I missing? What are we doing? Why are they sending untrained warriors up to the war?" "Because, dear brother, they aren't worth the cost of their training." Stating angrily, Yurieth clenched his fist, while Regis just nodded. "My father is trying to get them to stop doing that. But they draft commoners with the promise of becoming ranked, give them minimal training, and send them to die. My father and the protectors and huntsman cousins, and the other guardians and their ranks, have to train almost every warrior that comes from the academies that is not housed, and some who are from the lower houses. The kingdom doesn't waste resources on those it doesn't consider worthy of life," Regis explained as he flopped on his bed. "How can that be? The war could be won if everyone going to fight had half our training." Yurieth couldn't hide his shock. The anger that lives, no matter what the rank, would be wasted, offended him. "Did you know about this?" he demanded of his twin. Yurieth was quiet. sitting with his back against the wall behind his bed. His hood was pulled over his eyes as they glowed with magic. I have discovered no one here believes what our parents and mentors taught us. The honor of the high houses and the kingdom has been corrupted. Get some sleep. We are going to have a long night, but maybe we can teach them enough that they won't die on their first day at duty.